Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Brooke Lillehaugen and I'm a linguist here at Haverford College. I'm very appreciative to the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship for hosting this event, to Eric and Steph and Julie who did work to make this happen. And thank you all who are listening for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. We're going to bring you six short lightning talks followed by a panel discussion. I'm going to start off giving some context around the history of the project and some of the academic side of the project, and then you're going to hear from 4 Zaptec activists and one of the student participants who are going to bring their perspective and contexts to this work. After I'm done talking, you'll hear from Moises Garcia Guzman, and he'll bring you to Oaxaca because it's important when we're thinking about language and context to think of place. And to that end, I also want to take a moment here to let you know that I'm speaking to you tonight from Lenape land on Haverford College campus. And I want to give my honor and respect to the caretakers of this land from time immemorial to now and into the future. Oaxaca is not the only context where Zapotec is relevant, and we'll also be hearing from Professor Xochitl Flores Marcial, who'll bring us to the California, or as we call it, the Oaxaca, California context of the Zapotec diaspora outside of Los Angeles. We'll end the evening with a panel discussion where some more of the team members will join us. And to the extent that we can, we want to be live tweeting. So you see our accounts here, feel free to tweet us and we will try to reply as the evening goes on if we can. There's so many more people on the team. Colin, Tomas, Eloise, current research assistants who are doing amazing work. I also want to mention David Harrison and Kate Riestenberg in my department who have been very supportive and involved in this work. In addition to Center for Peace and Global Citizenship funding, which you'll hear more about later, I want to acknowledge funding and support from the Haverford College Libraries, from the Office of the Provost, and an external grant from the ACLS Digital Extension Project. I'm going to be talking about, we're all going to be talking about the Teacher Project and the Zapotec Talking Dictionaries, which form a network of activism and scholarship. These are created by international interdisciplinary teams that include non-native people such as myself, and you'll see many of them tonight, but not all of them. The team is larger than who will be here tonight. The work centers Zapotec authority and knowledge, and what we're showing you tonight is all educational, public-facing, and open access in nature. The Center for Peace and Global Citizenship has supported this work since I joined Haverford College in 2012. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, join in on the conversation using these hashtags that you see here. These hashtags form educational communities, and you're invited to use them either in your tweets or to search them and see conversations that have been going on. Zapotec languages are spoken in what is now the state of Oaxaca in Mexico and also in diaspora communities. To be very clear, there are Zapotec people and languages spoken today. One way that languages are often discriminated against is by framing them as something in the past, and so I want to make this very clear from the beginning. Zapotec is a large, diverse family of languages that is spoken in a very linguistically diverse state. So it's not only Zapotec languages that are spoken in Oaxaca, and you can see some of the other languages here. There's probably 400,000 or so speakers of Zapotec languages, though these languages are threatened by Spanish and by ideologies around Zapotec language. In some communities, children no longer are learning Zapotec language. Most speakers of Zapotec do not write their language today, and while languages do not need to be written to be languages, Zapotec has a long history of writing dating back over 2,000 years. And discrimination against speakers of Zapotec and acts of speaking Zapotec has a long history and continues today. To give a little context about some of this discrimination and the way writing is framed in a modern context, I want to read this quote from Janet Chavez Santiago, and you'll hear from her personally in just a little bit. She says, "When I was in elementary school in the 90s, I remember children speaking Zapotec in many contexts, playing in the streets, at parties, and during town celebrations, but never at school. Instead, we had to behave ourselves by not speaking Zapotec. Otherwise, teachers could punish us by giving us extra homework or by not letting us eat lunch or even beating us. Teachers made us believe that speaking Zapotec was disrespectful, something to be ashamed of. As a child, I never saw anything written in Zapotec. All my books and books that my parents bought me were in Spanish, so at some point I thought teachers were right. That Zapotec was a language with no value, so nobody wanted to write books in my language. And you'll see this was something she said in 2015 in a conference presentation. And since then, to be clear, Janet has written books in her language. And also Zapotec is one of the language families with the largest and oldest corpus of alphabetic text of languages of the Americas. Here you can see some examples. There's a 1578 dictionary and grammar. There's many religious texts. All of these, the three you see here, were created under the auspices of the Catholic Church and have named authors who are not Zapotec people, but of course, many unnamed Zapotec people must have been involved in the creation of these texts. The corpus also includes handwritten administrative texts that were created for local use, such as wills and testaments. Here you see an example of one such will. One of the things that Teacher is centrally concerned with is access. And of course, access is a very complex area. One thing we do is provide digital access to documents that are sometimes hard or impossible to physically access, oftentimes doing the primary digitization ourselves. Here's the website for Teacher if you want to check it out or save it for later. And one of the things here you can see is that you can browse and navigate through high-resolution digital images of a historical corpus of Zapotec texts. But access is more than, access to images. Here you see, for example, access to linguistic analysis. So this is the grammar that I mentioned a few slides back. It's organized like a Latin grammar, which was typical at the time, but actually Latin categories don't do a lot of favors for understanding how Zapotec grammar works. So we provide clickable pop-ups that allow you to encounter or to reference linguistic analysis from today, and then you can compare the original analysis with modern analysis, which doesn't always line up. These digital editions, which are available freely on Teacher, some of them are made in the context of courses I teach here. So a course I'm teaching right now, in fact, that you might hear Felipe talk about in a little bit. And here you can see at the bottom that students are co-authors, and notice that Janet Chavez Santiago is also a co-author on the digital edition of this particular text, which is a catechism. And we have overt pedagogical materials that we're working on. I'm gonna pop in the chat right now a link to these. This is a work in progress, but we already have 3 chapters which are available. These are being created for use in high school and college classrooms in the US and Mexico. So there's English and Spanish versions, and we invite anyone who wants to try them out to do so and to let us know. We're still in the revision process. So this is the work that is being funded by the ACLS grant. The historical corpus also connects to modern Zapotec languages in a variety of ways, including through a vocabulary where you can hear modern cognates to historical forms of Zapotec words that you encounter in the corpus. Those forms are those audio files are connected to a suite of talking dictionaries. Here is the talking dictionary that is directed by Moises Garcia Guzman, who you'll hear from next. And you see that the talking dictionaries have audio, they have images, and they also have embedded videos, for example, in this instance. And this is now from Felipe's Dictionary for San Lucas Kiowa Zapotec, embedded tweets. So here you see the tweet being embedded as an example sentence for this particular word. So thinking back about the corpus of historical texts on Zapotec, these texts are made publicly available on Teacher as soon as we have permission, for example, to post images, even if that's all we have, because the acknowledgement and the existence of these texts is important to the community. And then as we have more materials available, we add them. The project has grown collaboratively with students and with Zapotec speakers and community members. And the historical corpus connects to modern Zapotec through the talking dictionaries and through this born digital corpus on Twitter. Our methodology strives to be cyclical and reciprocal in nature, and I put the asterisk there to remind myself to say that a lot of what is reciprocity and what is possible there has to do with types of funding that are available and where sometimes there are structural impediments to reciprocity in a variety of ways. And I'll show some examples. I'm mindful of the time. We'll take about 2 more minutes and I'll pass this on. So here's an example of some of the tweeting that I was talking about. Notice this is bilingual, so this is also an invitation to English speakers to understand this particular tweet. Here is a tweet from Janet Chavez Santiago looking at the Catechism of Levanta that you saw the digital edition of during a visit to Haverford College. So Janet was invited to come to Haverford College and to see this text in person, which we have in our special collections. Again, some knowledge exchange on Twitter. Another way in which reciprocity has happened has been in person, back in better times, and hopefully again soon. Often funded by the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship. Here is an example of where I took my class down to a high school that we partner with in Tlacolula, CETIS 124, where Zaptec students and students in my class can learn together about these texts. Here's another example from that, and we trip together to the archive in Oaxaca to the Bergoa. And again, thinking about reciprocity, here we have Moises Garcia Guzman at Haverford College teaching a group of students. And this was in my IntroLing class, and I asked them if they had ever learned about any Indigenous topic from a Native person before, and all the students in the room that day said they had not. So this was the first time. And I want to mention here, this actually has been one of the harder aspects to fund. It's been easier to find funding to bring students down to Oaxaca and a lot harder to find funding to bring Zaptec educators to campus. And so I'm particularly grateful to the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship who funded Moises's trip. And I hope it's something that we can continue. Here you see him teaching in many contexts, not just in my class. So I'm going to pass the mic to Moises now and again remind you of the lightning talks that are coming up. Take a note of people's Twitter handles if you want to engage with them. And I'll just leave by saying, if you're inspired after tonight to learn more about this work, you will have learned directly from 4 Zaptec educators and consider inviting them to speak on your campus about Zaptec work. All right, Moises, to you. Thank you.
Moises Garcia Guzman, Narena Nietzun, Zunro, Gdoni Rienlo Yoptu de Zarena, Gdoste Sankron, Nina Patron, Stegujlajnu, de Gukne de Nina Debniet, Español, Wasgdore, Ne Donante, Demnietzan, Nezeulane, and Dizastenu. Nerza clas nu te zeula zân șteriza gâclaci nu ne astan rjulas nu rakben lo de yits ni bagulal te qua signa yits ni san nantian știos ten zate yo tu te jakben lo de yitski ne știos ten zate de miet de mașuel de ni ver gâclaci nu par jakben zeula yitski Hello, my name is Moises Garcia Guzman. I am a Zapotec speaker of this town, San Jerónimo Tlacochahuaya. The church behind me is the Church of Saint Geronimo. It was built in 1558, and we are a Zapotec town. We are very happy that we continue that legacy of the Zapotec language. And also we are happy that we learn about Zapotec through documents, especially documents through the Teacher website and the Teacher project. One of those documents was the will of Sebastiana de Mendoza. We are extremely happy that that document came to light, and we'll learn so many details about her life and her legacy as a Zapotec woman. It's thanks to the sponsorship of Haverford College and CPGC that we know a lot of details about these documents that we have in the website. Thank you very much for this effort. Thank you very much for all this work. And also because of those details, we get to know our language better. We get to know some of the details that were written in those documents. Thank you very much, and as we're going to see later on in this course, right now because of the pandemic, the church is closed. We are only hearing the bells right now, which is a very special moment that we are doing this clip. But we're also going inside to the monastery where Juan of Cordova lived, which is one of the great translators or people who study the language before. He was not a linguist, so that also gives us a great responsibility, a great encouragement to continue working with the language. Thank you, Haverford College, and thank you, CPGC. This is the place where Cordova lived, and every time we think about colonial documents, he comes to mind because he's a reference. These are the hallways where he worked, and he tried to understand the language. And every time we consult colonial documents, he's the reference, and to me as an activist, it's important that I keep this relationship because he also, as part of his work, he tried to understand the people, the natives that he just got to know. And to us, it's important that we keep this, and because of the work that we have with Haverford College and the CPGC, well, this is how it happens. This relationship, this collaboration makes it possible. And to me, it's very important that we keep this work continuation throughout the years. Also, it is the way that I myself as an activist try to understand my own language. I know the language because it's in my mind, but this work that we have with the students and with the professors is what makes it really important. And it has helped me a lot understanding the language, understanding the rules, the grammar, everything that I know about it is because of this continuous collaboration. Thank you very much, Haverford College. Thank you, CPGC, for making it possible. Thank you. One of the documents that are really important that came to us because of the work of Chicha was the will of Sebastiana de Mendoza. She was a powerful woman from La Cochahuaya, and we learn a lot of details of her life, of her properties because of that will. And one thing that really stands out is that even today we still continue some of the traditions that she mentioned or that we can guess from that document. For example, this plot of land is from my maternal great-grandmother. And according to a local tradition here in the town, it can be inherited only by women. So my great-grandmother inherited to her great-granddaughter. And that in turn is going to be part of my daughter's inheritance. So one of the things that is really important is that being a tradition of the colonial period, it was designed to fight male exclusiveness in receiving inheritance, which is also important. And that continues today, and we are honoring that legacy of Sebastiana de Mendoza. So that's why, to me, it's really important that we see these documents. It's important that we learn a lot about them, that we analyze them, and it's because the work of Chicha and the specialists and all the teams that are behind this work. So thank you very much, Haverford College. Thank you to the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship and all members who participate in this great effort. Greetings from San Jerónimo Tlacochahuaya in the southern region of Mexico.
Nana Vinjiye. Jiye. Ana integej. Stem bing nirunche la dich.
Sakchi, Nala Yane Chave Santiago. Rabata Zuwa, Gujire Konja Yup to the Kije, Zangnika Yunia Kondirza. Kije is as Zangira Yenium Kon Ladich. Hi, my name is Janet Chavez Santiago, and I'm very happy to be here with you today and share the work that I've been doing with Zapotec and my weaving tradition. I am from Tetitlán del Valle in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I belong to the fourth generation of weavers in my family. I understand and know how to weave a rug from beginning to end. My parents, they have been responsible for transmitting me their knowledge and their passion for this art and letting me explore and express myself through threads to tell stories of my great-grandparents, my grandparents, of my parents, and of course my own stories. Furthermore, my parents have given me two visions of the world. There's Dijazang, or Zapotec language, and or weaving. There's Sonium con Ladich, Galrunchiladi. They are my great-grandparents. Back in the 60s, my great-grandfather Victoriano was, and still is, a well-recognized weaver. From him, my father inherited the weaving, the love, and respect to our traditions. This is my family. My father Fe, my mom Lola, my brother Eric, my sister-in-law Elsa, my brother Omar, and me. Our weaving tradition derives from ancestral knowledge, but this does not make the process static. The creativity of each weaver makes this art contemporary. Our traditions change and evolve as human beings innovate and incorporate influences from the world as we know it now. We weave the patterns that we see in the pre-Hispanic buildings of Mitla and Monte Alban to keep the Zapotecs from the past alive. But we also recreate those patterns to share our dreams, our experiences, our present. The weaving process has a deep closeness with nature and divinity. Any weaver in the world will need certain materials that only the local natural surroundings can provide, and each culture will have its own rituals to obtain the raw material and to prepare it. The weft is the thread that is woven between the warp. They are our paper and our pencil to create or narrate a story. Together, weft and warp connect our past with our present. With our hands, as weavers, we can express our beliefs, customs, and traditions. And even when we weave in our native language, our textiles can be understood in any language and culture in the world, indigenous and non-indigenous, Zapotec or non-Zapotec. Through our yarn, we connect with our past and our ancestors, those who we did not meet, and in our weavings, we preserve and honor them. In this context, through the new technologies and digital media that connect us to the outside world, we can use the symbols represented in textiles to translate, connect, and communicate our language and culture with other cultures and other languages around the world. Although digital media and social networks are part of our daily lives and a way to interact with the world outside, as speakers of indigenous languages, we still need to own these spaces. That is, just as we take our textiles as a way to share our culture, our tradition, and be recognized worldwide, digital platforms need to show our languages, our culture in the present, because we are in the present. I remember during my elementary and middle school education, which I attended in my town in Teotitlán del Valle, the history and geography books provided by the Federal Institution of Public Education portrayed the Zapotecs as a culture from the past, who spoke a language that was not Spanish and who were weavers and farmers, a civilization that lived in the same territory in which I live today. Neither books nor teachers would recognize that we were living and being educated in a very much like Zapotec community, where its inhabitants are weavers, farmers, academics, and Zapotec speakers. A community that has very well-founded traditions, customs, and beliefs strongly supported by both by time and present. In this Zapotec activism right and in seeking to contribute with the creation of new alternatives to learn Zapotec and at the same time to document not only Zapotec as a language but also as a culture in a way that it can be useful and practical to the community and also reachable for those living outside our town and outsiders in general. In 2013, with the support of Professor Brook, we created the Teotitlán del Valle Zapotec Talking Dictionary. This dictionary has had various positive impacts, like creating a link between the speaker and the digital space in their own language. It also is an open source that actively includes native speakers and gives them credit for their contribution. So then the project itself becomes part of the community and their own benefit. For me, it is very important to portray and to put in context what is the meaning of being from Teotitlán and being a weaver. It's our daily life, it's our the way that we speak, it's the way that we communicate not only within the community but with the world outside. Then when they see and when they consult the Teotitlán del Valle Zapotec Talking Dictionary, they can recognize themselves. Speakers can recognize themselves. They can see themselves out there. And for me, that is something that it's just very, very powerful, and it's a way for me to contribute to change the history and the story of the new generations. For me, also, it is very important to include the weaving tradition, because Teotitlán del Valle is a town of weavers, and just like language, younger generations are losing the tradition of being weavers. I've been able to create a link between the native speakers of Zapotec with the digital space, and also it has include the native speakers to participate in what they want to see, hear, listen in their language from their town. That's why it is very important for me to include and to put in context what is the meaning of being from Teotitlán, what is the meaning of speak Zapotec in our own context, so people who uses it can either learn about it or identify themselves in this tool, with this tool. Since 2013, I have been very lucky to work with students from Haverford, Bryn Mawr, Swarthmore colleges, coming here and seeing and live the experience and live in our town and see people and getting in touch with people, get involved with the culture. For me, that is how I contribute to educate people in our culture and in our language. It is urgent that we get involved and change the information that is out there to stop the denial of our continued existence and educate people to eliminate the erroneous idea that being indigenous is limited to the past. We must use the digital space as a tool to share not only our history but also our present, because as I said before, we are in the present.
And before I go, let me introduce you to the 5th generation of weavers in my family.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Agüero. I'm a junior at Haverford, and I was funded by the CBGC to work with the Teacher Project this past summer. When I heard about Teacher, I was very interested right away. I'm just generally interested in learning new languages and cultures, and I was very, very excited to learn about an indigenous language. More than that, I felt very confident that I had a lot of knowledge to bring to the table because I myself speak an indigenous language. It's called Guarani. I'm from Paraguay, and in Paraguay, most people grow up speaking both Spanish and Guarani. We are taught Guarani at schools from first grade to our senior year in high school, and we're generally very proud of speaking Guarani. We use it as a tool when we go abroad. For instance, soccer players use it during matches to communicate their tactics and plans, and therefore avoid the opposite team of understanding what is going on. Everything is stronger in Guarani, so if we want to communicate deep love or anger or frustration, we usually turn to our sweet Guarani language. Although this is slowly changing, especially with the younger generations and more people are shifting towards Spanish, I don't think that there is a Paraguayan that resents speaking Guarani. If anything, younger people usually feel frustrated that their parents didn't speak in Guarani to them enough when they were younger, and they, when they grow old, they don't actually speak it very well. I feel like they feel very frustrated when that's the situation. I thought I would find something similar with Ticha. I thought that just like Guarani, Zapotec was fading slowly, and that the goal of Ticha was to protect and preserve Zapotec. And this is true in a way. However, there is a lot more to Ticha, to the Ticha project, and there is a big difference between my relationship with Guarani and Zapotec community members' relationship with Zapotec. I learned that Zapotec is not taught in schools, and in most communities, the youngest Zapotec speaker is at least 40 years old, which means that children are no longer learning Zapotec. And while some Zapotec community members are proud of and advocate for their language and their language variation, this is not necessarily true among all or most community members. What I'm trying to say is that Zapotec in context is very different from Guarani in context. This changed my entire perspective and approach to my work with Ticha. I put what I knew about speaking an indigenous language kind of in the background, and I started to absorb and learn about what other communities experience with their language. I learned a little bit more in every meeting with the team, but most importantly, I learned with every translation that I did for Ticha. I translated several documents from different communities. These documents included bills of sale, testaments, land deeds, receipts. So I was able to learn about Zapata community practices from years and years ago. And what is mind-blowing about all of this is that some Zapata community members do not always have that same opportunity to learn about their own culture, because they now find it hard to read documents written in Zapotec. Sometimes they're translated to English, and sometimes they're translated to early modern Spanish, or that is, it was translated in the past. But I do speak English, and fortunately Spanish as well. And this allowed me to put a tiny piece in the puzzle of making Zapotec documents accessible to its own people. When I learned that I was not simply translating for the sake of, having a translation, but that I was helping Zapata community members have access to their own history, culture, and customs, it made me see the significance of this project. It made me pay a lot more attention to how I was translating these documents. It made me think a lot, read a lot, and pay attention to how community members express themselves so that I could convey the messages in a way that it was accessible to them and avoid any obstacles that could impede Zapotec people or anybody really of learning about Zapotec language, culture, and community. I also worked in the translation of the Ticha teaching modules. These modules worked as an introduction to Colonial Valley Zapotec history and structure, and this allowed the participants in the conversatorios to learn about Colonial Valley Zapotec and compare it and contrast it with their own Zapotec variation, if their Zapotec variation was different. What is more important about these modules and about the conversatorios is not really the facts that they learned, but how these conversatorios made them feel. I only learned about this through the leaders of this conversatorios and the reports that they made, Felipe and Social, who are present here today. But even through them, I was able to understand the great impact and feel the great impact these modules had on the participants. The participants really opened up about how they felt growing up as Zapotec speakers, and they also reflected on how they feel today about their language and about their culture. Of course, I cannot speak for them, but it seemed to me that it was clearer to them after these conversatorios that Zapotec is valuable, that Zapotec is worth protecting, preserving, and promoting. Even relatives of participants who were not technically part of the conversatorios try to make a way of tuning in and learning about their own language. What this means to me is that our translation group did not just translate documents from English to Spanish. Our translation group made this Zapotec materials a little bit more accessible to Zapotec community members themselves. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. How are you? It's pretty exciting to be able to talk to you today through this virtual space. I have 3 goals for this brief presentation. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I will tell you a little bit about Oaxaca, California, and finally, I will talk about my involvement with the Ticha project. So let's start. My name is Xochitl Flores Marcial. I'm a Zapotec scholar. I earned my PhD in history at UCLA, where I met several of the other members of the Ticha team, and where I focused my research on the Guelaguetza system, which is a Zapotec code of conduct that reinforced social networks through the acts of collaboration and exchange inside of indigenous community. I am currently an assistant professor at California State University, Northridge, where I teach history courses focused on Mexican peoples, Mesoamerican literate societies, and the history of the Americas. I also teach courses on Latin American women, and all of the courses that I've been teaching so far have been through the lens of indigenous peoples. I am also a member of the Ticha board, and the team that continued to work in amplifying the voices of Zapotec language speakers and developing lessons that uplift indigenous peoples, their culture, and their knowledge. Let me tell you now a little bit about Baja California. In the background, you can see a photo of the inauguration of an exhibit that I helped design and produce at the Central Library of Los Angeles. The exhibit was called Visualizing Language, Oaxaca in LA, and made visible the experiences of migrant indigenous peoples. There are over 250,000 Zapotec language speakers in Baja California. The speakers come from several different communities in Oaxaca. If you are curious and you want to go and take a look at a map, you will see that Oaxaca is quite diverse in its geography. But this geography also extends to indigenous Oaxacan languages and cultures too. So I feel very fortunate to be able to work with the Oaxacan diaspora in the transnational spaces where I am also a member, both in Oaxaca and here in LA. At CSUN, every semester, I meet students of Oaxacan origin, and it's so exciting to be able to share these pedagogical resources with them and encourage them to find answers to the questions as they learn about their own history. This summer, I invited previous students to join the Ticha Conversatorios that I led as part of the American Council for Learned Societies Digital Extension Grant. So now let me tell you a little bit about that. This summer, we had anticipated, we already knew that we were going to be working in digital methods, and we knew that we were going to use virtual spaces for the work that we were doing, but we did not anticipate to have a pandemic. So some of our plans for the summer, for example, traveling to Oaxaca and making connections with members of communities, we could not do that. But something really wonderful happened. As a team, we discussed the different ways in which we should move forward. And it has always been important to ensure that indigenous language speakers are collaborators, that they are collaborators, that they are co-authors, that they are active participants in developing the resources that we are developing through the work in the Ticha project. And of course, the new this new situation in which we found ourselves forced us to make some decisions that resulted in very positive outcomes. So for example, the conversatorios this summer, we had several speakers from different regions. And so as you've learned in this, program today, Zapotec is a language family. And so the languages can be very different. And so sometimes a speaker might not be able to understand the language that another Zapotec speaker from a different region speaks. And so in the conversatorios, we had, in the one that I led, there were people from 5 different regions. And there were speakers that were joining us from Oaxaca, from their community in Oaxaca, and also from their homes here in California. So I was able to invite previous students who I had met in the courses that I teach who are of Oaxacan origin. And it was incredible to be able to discuss Zapotec history, Zapotec language, to be able to have a space where there was all of this very active dialogue with members of the community. Now, this is one of the reasons why I am so proud to be a part of this team, because this has always been a goal. This has always been one of the goals of the Ticha team, to ensure that we are very active and very proactive in inviting members of the community as producers, as collaborators. And this is something that you can see through the study of history. So for example, Zapotecs started writing, they were a literate society 2,500 years ago, and they wrote in different ways, but the types of evidence that we have today, for example, are on stone monuments. And those monuments, of course, we can visit them in archaeological sites and we can see them in museums. But something that's super great is to see how Zapotecs, through autonomy and self-determination, made decisions where they were using all of the technologies at their disposal to continue writing their own histories, to continue producing texts with their own voices. And so if we study the Zapotecs of 2,500 years ago, we can see their histories written on hides, for example, deer hides. We can see them on pottery. We can see them on monumental architecture. So we know that Zapotecs had intellectual life, that they had these incredible intellectual achievements. And so we can see Zapotec epistemology in those achievements and in those monuments of history. If you fast forward and you start to then consider the transformations as a result of colonization, when you start to see, for example, the introduction of alphabetic text, Zapotecs took that alphabetic text and then continued writing their histories, despite the challenges of colonization, despite the different traumas of conquest. Zapotecs made the effort and took this autonomous decision to continue writing their histories. And so then we can see when we go through the Ticha Digital Explorer website, where we can see manuscripts and also published texts. And I just happen to have a published text sitting right next to me. Oh, and I'm sorry about the virtual, but here it is. This book was published in the 16th century by, all the licenses were requested by a Dominican friar born in Spain, but his collaborators were all Zapotec. And so in the work that we're doing, we get to shed some light, we get to discuss the ways in which Zapotecs continue to use all of the technologies at their disposal, as we have always done, to then write our stories, to tell our own stories. And here in the Ticha work, one of the things that we've done in the Ticha, as part of the Ticha work, is that we're using Twitter, we're using social media. Zapotecs are modern people. We continue to write our histories. We are using our internet, our phones, our computers, our different devices to demonstrate that we continue to be producers of content. And so it's pretty exciting. I definitely invite you to poke around the Ticha website, to read our blogs. You can see the perspectives of the different participants, and to ask some of these questions. Look up, this exhibit, for example, which you can visit virtually. There is so much to learn, and I'm really thankful to be able to do this work through a virtual space, because anyone with an internet connection can have access to this knowledge. Thank you so much for listening to me. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to tweet at me.
Hi, everyone. Sakuji. Still ladder, but snap and on as he read to la Naji. We are Shni Ruhnian to the Pachiza Stija. So that translation is thank you again for being with us, and thank you CPGC for inviting me to talk about my language activism. My name is Felipe Lopez, and I'm currently a postdoctoral a scholar at the Harvard College. I am, the title is postdoctoral scholar in community engaged digital scholarship at Harvard, where I'm working with the project called Teacher, which I guess Brooke will be talking about it in a moment. And I'm here at the beautiful campus at Harvard College. So I hope that by talking a little bit about what I do would give you an idea of why so many of us language activists who do what we do, sometimes it's a very lonely active that we do because we really love our language. We really like it to continue, and under what contexts do we do that? So let me just start by how everything began and where it began. So my activism began in 1992 when I really noticed that my community was losing the language in the immigrant community because a lot of the parents were not speaking their kids into, in Zapotec. They would prefer to speak to them either in Spanish or English, and then, or sometimes just straight in English. So we need to understand why people do things, right? But for the case of Zapotec, it's because Zapotec or any indigenous language in Mexico is not fully appreciated as being seen as an obstacle. So parents tend to think that if they can only speak their kids in Spanish, or in this case in English, that the kid will have a better opportunity in life. So as I noticed that, I felt that my language was on a route of disappearing, and I started working with the linguist at UCLA in 1992 to preserve and write my language, right? So this work that we started in 1992 and 1999, we were able to come up a trilingual dictionary, which is Zapotec, Spanish, and English. And in 1995, I was asked to teach a course in Zapotec at UCSD. So Pamela Monroe, Brooke Lillehagen, and we work on a 3-volume of didactic materials to be used at the college level, which I've been using to teach Zapotec at UCSD as well as UCLA, and then many hours here at Harvard College. And but being active is just not, trying to preserve the language, and also like, how do you go beyond academia? And for me, that was a real question. So if I was being active in trying to preserve my language, but how would I go about passing on the language to the younger generation? And I was very, very fortunate to be able to actually do that, because in 2016, I was fortunate to contact a high school in Oaxaca. It's a community called Tlacolula, where Brooke Lillehagen and I began a project which is called Voces del Valle, and also I began to be more active in the Tacan dictionaries, which is also part of the Harvard College project through Brooke Lillehagen. So in 2016, we began working with a group of Zapotec students at this high school, which is called CETI 124, and the project was really interesting to me because it was the first time that the Zapotec that I speak in the Valley of Oaxaca was going to be used in social media. So there was a Twitter project that we started, and for me personally, that made me think about, since I began writing my language and also what that meant for me. And in a sense, it really went against all these ideologies of indigenous language not being, first of all, not being a real language, but also not being quote unquote modern, right? So the thing that it really impacted me is that I was able to finally show that Zapotec also can be used through Twitter globally, so they will reach the community, the global community. That will, through Twitter, we will be able to make my language visible, if you will, because it went beyond our community, our Zapotec community. So there was really a powerful way of saying, hey, I'm here, Zapotec is a real language. It can be used, what they call in oral tradition, but as I said, it's just this false perception of an indigenous language is an oral tradition. Zapotec has been written for at least 2,500 years ago, and then since then, a lot of people have been writing it, and this was an opportunity for me to really present it and be visible. So not only that, but also it made me realize and enforce the idea of writing tweets. I started writing poetry in Twitter, which all these tweets that I was doing in poetry that eventually were published, and I will sharing these poems with you in a bit. But not only being visible, but writing poetry, and also it made me think about what other ways I could make my language visible, which I started also writing short stories, which that made me win statewide competition in 2017 for writing a short story about an immigrant experience. So I think that, as you can see, everything is sort of tied together from speaking the language, and then began writing it, and then that began to be sort of resistant in order to show that we are here and we are not going anywhere, and then we are adding more and more students and young people to write the language. So in that regards, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to share a few of my poems so you can hear the language, but also I will put it in my, I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see as I read in Zapotec, it's going to be translated in English as well. So just give me 1 second. And I will share my screen with you so you guys can see that. Let's see, I need to find it first. Here we go. Okay, so one of these poems have been published in Latin American Literary Review, the Central Review, and Latin American Literature Today. So the first one, it's titled Mom or Grandmother, as you guys can see here. So let's start with that. Waido kukaldia. Utiae. Laticha. Zikia. Shini kukaldegakia. Chinezak Dios Leona. Latlaza. Okay. The next one is the Money Cage. And it's called in Zapotec Yekmul. Latirri Amul, Ziatriani Lovesh, Bzenyarik, Ruarik, Tubuina, Disarguia, Pernash Quadririk, Shinruana, Quanrasa, Lasiat Buinoa, Yekmul Night. And the other one is titled Mother or Shnana. Naigamnalo, Gets Karia, Najivikia, Kariu, Zeo, Ladinwa, Shini Zeo, Shini Iza, Arbando Shalio, Shinyer Wielo, Rbanya Arjunio, Arbeza Shin Stave. And the last one, it's Pesh Anyam, or translated in English as Mitla. Wialuaji, Nani Natarik, Nataji, Rniana, Reketayana, La Jagika, Winze, Winziet, Alruanrak. Azangrindiaga, Kaza Nivia, Kedergel Divzilua, Schnikadniaga, Loge Shniana, Huersuna Kuja, Real Stave, Neo of Zilua, Carriera Shava, no to got Kriye, Pet Carrielos na Shigawa, Carrier Mulgin Lua, Shute go, Shuzenya. All right, thank you so much.